Alright everyone, so we're going to be doing a thermostat change, and we're also going to be repairing and or replacing the heater core because of poor heating capabilities in the vehicle. So first thing you want to do is get the car on jack, and then you're going to want to remove this under tray right here. Obviously I removed it already, but what you want to do is literally all you're going to see is Phillips screws, and just remove them. There should be a few here as well, and just remove them very straightforward. So that should get you to the next step, which is basically you have access to underneath the engine bay. So in this application I will actually be removing the coolant drain plug from the block. I don't know if you guys can see it. There it is right there. That's the first part we're going to drain, and then we're going to go drain the radiator right here. So we're going to drain these two things. Once we get that done, we will start replacing the pieces in the system. So I'll get going on that, and I'll show you along the way. Draining the radiator. Just want to loosen this guy up right here. Make sure your cap is open so that it doesn't create a vacuum. And let this drain. First we want to remove these 4 clips right here that are holding the cover that goes over the radiator. Next we want to remove the intake. Next we want to remove this right here. So we have a T25, and it's going to go right in this corner right here. And on the other side is a rivet, at least for me. Just pop that right out. I already pulled the nipple portion, but now you should be able to pull this up. And then disconnect this electrical connector right here. Make sure you place this on the side. Next we want to remove the fan. So get your tool and then lock it on the nut. And make sure that you go counterclockwise. There we go. And then spin it in reverse thread until this fan comes out. Just make sure you have a good grip on it, because you don't want this to fall. You're going to see a little fuse here. I just want to pull that out of the way, and that should allow you to freely remove your shroud. Next, removing the thermostat, we want to first loosen this clip right here, pull it off, and carefully move it to the side. As you can see here, this is so brittle, so we're going to end up probably wrapping this in some electrical tape, because this is not good to have exposed. We want to remove the thermostat now, so we take a 13mm socket and remove the larger bolt. It is also connected to the engine lifting eye. Next, we want to remove the 10mm bolts that are holding on only to the thermostat. Okay, so now we got all 4 bolts removed. We want to start slowly getting ready to pull the hose from the thermostat. So you want to pull these out right here, as I've done. A little penetrating oil could probably help. Also, now is a good time to cover up your belt right below it, so that whatever does spill doesn't go right onto your belts if you're not going to be replacing them. Okay, now that we loosen the bolts, we loosen the pins, we're ready to pull the hoses off of the thermostat housing. And there we go. Here's the old thermostat. I'm deciding to go with a Waller thermostat, which is the OEM part that came on the car. Great quality part. As you can see, this is a genuine BMW. This is the Waller. Pretty much no differences. Only difference you could see is there's a BMW logo here, and there's nothing on this one. So pretty big price savings for the same part. Now that I got the harness taped up a little bit so it's not completely exposed, we're going to put the water pump back in. You have the option to remove this oil drain line right here. You don't actually have to, though, if you are pretty good at maneuvering the new thermostat in place. So I'll try doing it without it, and if I need to, I'll just remove the line. All right, and there you go. I didn't need to do that. So we're just gonna slide the hoses back in place, and just want to put all the bolts back in place. And then we want to put the last bolt in for the hanger eye. And then just tighten them down. I'll put the torque value in the on the screen so you guys can torque these down correctly, and we'll move on to the heater core next. Also, don't forget, when you go to secure the hoses on, that you don't forget the pieces that go on the hose. This is the heater valve. This is another culprit of an issue we are having with inconsistent heat in the vehicle. When you have the vehicle at 90 degrees or the max temperature and you are cycling it through, this is basically what is engaging that. Sometimes the valves in there can get stuck, so now at this point you can either replace this piece or you can try and repair it. I will show you guys to get to that point, and I will also show you how to repair it, so it's up to you how you want to go. Now that we have the intake off, we also want to remove the mass airflow. So we want to loosen this band right here and just pull right off. You want to remove these two hoses right here with these clamps, and then we will take apart the valve. There's going to be probably some coolant in here, so see if you can find a way to route the coolant out. Here's the heater core valve removed. So what we're going to do now is, if we're going to be replacing it, actually just get the new one, and we want to put it back in these two hoses right here. If we want to repair it, what we want to do is remove these 4 fasteners right here. So I'm going to do that now, and let's see what happens. So we want to get our T10 hex bit and remove these 4 fasteners. Gently start wiggling it out. Looks to be okay, but I'm curious to see if the thermostat is the problem or it's the heater core. Well, in all honesty, this looks to be okay. So I've seen worse from other people. Putting the hoses back on is just the reverse of how we had them taken off. And the valve is back on and installed. Pretty straightforward. As you can see, you just got to line up those rubber dampeners, and you just want to fasten up those hoses behind it back to the valve. So whether you repaired yours, replaced yours, or just inspected it to see if anything was bad, that's how you would take it off. Also, don't forget to put the wiring back on so that the valve actually is working. Now that we checked the heater valve and replaced the thermostat, it's time to start putting the fan and radiator shroud back in place. Since I drained about a half gallon of coolant from the radiator, I ended up not draining from the block due to a time restriction, but if you check out my other video, you can see how that's done. So I'm just going to about fill with half a gallon and maybe a little bit more until fluid starts coming out of this bleeder screw hole. Don't forget 90 degrees, 91 degrees, your max heat temperature. Make sure it's on a hot, fan on low so that the valve is open for the heater. I'm pouring a 50-50 mixture right now, so keep that in mind when you're doing this. If you're doing a full block and radiator, you can probably just do 1 gallon and 1 gallon, but considering I didn't drain a lot, I already am pouring pre-mixed in. As you can see, the level is above the full mark, but we're still not getting fluid out of the bleeder valve, so we're going to keep pouring. I did lose a little bit when I looked at the heater valve that I was not able to capture, so I'm probably pouring a little bit more than what I was able to pull out of the car. But additionally, you know, that it could have been that the heater was not properly working. Also, in addition to the bad thermostat, an improperly bled system. So, you know, I may actually end up putting more coolant than I drained, but it might be necessary. Just FYI, this was not a full gallon that I poured into the car. As you can see, the fluid level is just at the top there, so we want to go slow now. And I would say that is fairly good indication that we are at the top, as there seems to be no more air bubbles coming out. Let's confirm that. Yep. Okay, so now you want to put your bleeder screw in. So you want to put your bleeder screw back in. Don't over tighten it, but make sure it's tight. The radiator cap is what's going to go on next. Now we're going to start it up and see how it handles. So we're starting the car now. We want to let it idle at least the middle of the water temperature gauge on the dash, and just inspect around the car where we did the repairs to make sure there are no leaks. From there we will assess if it's safe for a drive or if we need to continue bleeding because it's overheating. So we'll get back to that when we know more. Having replaced the thermostat and taking a look at the heater core valve, we realized that we're still not getting heat. So what we're going to do now is do a little bit more of a fine dive into this. I have disabled the heater core valve wire, and what that does is it defaults the heater core valve to stay open. When that happens, I get full heat. Knowing that with the heater core valve disabled, the heater core sensor that's behind our HVAC unit might be the culprit. I'm not guaranteeing that this is going to work for you, but my hope is that when I change this sensor right here, that this will fix my issue. What my thoughts are that basically this sensor is bad, and what's happening is it's not telling the heater core valve when to open and close. That's when I actually disable it, it starts working. So let's take a look and see if this works. What we'll want to do first to access this sensor is remove the molding trim. As you can see, I already took it off. There's the trim down there, but you'll want a tool something like this right here to take them off, and it'll do the job real well, and it'll come off very quickly. Next, we're going to want to take off the screws that are holding on the radio. Radio is out. You're going to have the antenna right here. Make sure you gently pry that out. With the radio out, you can see per this little diagram on the radio, you're going to want to stick a flathead screwdriver in here and pry up. And next we're going to want to remove the actual HVAC piece right here. With the HVAC off, we can then start taking the connectors off. Not completely necessary, but for the video purposes, I'm going to get them out of the way for us. That is the actual sensor we want to replace right there. This one is white. As you can see, there's a little bit of discoloration on the top of the T. I'm not sure if that's something burned or just because it happens to be white, but regardless, the orientation of that sensor is basically facing inward. The orientation of the sensor is going to go just like that. As you can see, just to the right of the black sensor that I'm holding is the old one that we're going to be replacing, so it's just going to go in right like that. Just below the T of that sensor is a little black plug. We want to remove that. It's a little tight in there, so what I did was also remove the lower glove box sunglass holder. All you want to do is just stick your hand in here and just push out. I already had pushed it out, but it'll come out real easy. And what that does is it gives you a little bit more access from below as well. Carefully and slowly with a flathead from maybe underneath where that sunglass holder is, you just want to slowly pry out the sensor. So the black one is in now, which is the new sensor. I haven't pushed it into lock. There's these two clips that'll lock it into place. Just push it all the way through and you should have it locked into place. And then you want to put this sensor right here, the one in green and like a grayish blue, and plug that into the back of it, and that should be it for the sensor replacement. And after that, all we do is just put everything back in place, and I'll show you guys that along the way. Sensor is clipped in. I am just going to clip the bottom of that actual mating piece for the electronic component, and we're going to put everything back together. Now that we have the sensor plugged in, we're going to want to put the HVAC unit back together. So pretty self-explanatory. They're all color-coded, so just put them right back in how you would expect them to go back in. Alright, and it's all fastened up. Just make sure everything is in. And then we're going to push that back into the piece. Just confirm that, you know, the sensor is in, that wire is hooked up. Alright, we're good. Okay, all that's left now is the radio. Again, for the radio, we want to plug in our antenna right here and the actual wiring harness here. Put your 2 screws back in. Just push right in. It'll click and it's back in place. Like I had mentioned before, I had unplugged the heater control valve with that black little sensor right there. So what we're gonna do now is that I have this electrical taped off. I'm gonna plug this guy back into the sensor down there. Sensor is back in. All right, so the moment of truth is now. The sensor is in, the brand new one that we put in. The heater valve is plugged back in, and we're gonna run it now until we hit the middle and hope that ultimately this new sensor is sensing the correct temperature in the heater core and opening and closing the valve correctly so that we can actually get heat into the cabin. So let's see, I'm gonna run it for a few minutes to confirm that I have full operation and I'm not getting heat from a previous drive cycle when I was actually leaving the heater core defaulted open. Okay, so the car's been running for a few minutes now, and I can confirm that that heater core sensor that we replaced is the culprit of the no heat in the car. The sensor is replaced, the heater core valve is plugged back in, and we have full-blown heat. This is really hot air coming out, as it should be. Before I replaced this sensor and I had the heater core valve plugged in, I was getting air temperature from the outside or barely any heat. So I would say that this sensor might be your culprit for having no heat in your cabin if you've done the other type of replacement, which is change the thermostat and at least inspect the heater core valve. Hopefully, with that said, this leads you guys in the right direction, and hopefully you guys can get a fix done from this video and keep you nice and warm for this coming winter. Thanks and good luck.